Good morning, and once again, you're welcome to my channel History with Hansa. This is Dr. Hansa Das with you, and this video is going to be the second one in the series of videos on historical sources of ancient Indian history. In my last video, I have talked in detail about the literary sources of ancient Indian history, and let me tell you about the subject matter of this particular video. First, we will talk about archaeological sources, and then we will make a comparison between literary and archaeological ones, and we will look into how history can be constructed on the basis of these sources, and what are the limitations, the merits, demerits, advantages, disadvantages of these sources. But before we proceed, we need to understand what archaeological source is all about. What is the meaning of archaeology? Now, archaeology is the systematic study of antiquities and the weaving of the earlier history of the nation from the remains of the buildings, burial places, implements, utensils, ornaments, etc. Or, if we define it in other words, it is the act of examining and interpreting human history through its physical remains and material culture. So, different from literary sources. Now, when we classify archaeological sources into different categories, we classify them as broadly into inscriptions, coins, monuments, paintings, and sculpture and material remains. So, in this presentation, we are going to look into the details of all these archaeological sources and the manner in which they help us in constructing and reconstructing the history of our ancient past. Let us begin with inscriptions. Now, inscriptions are those written records which are engraved on rocks, stone slabs, pillars, and on metal places. And the study of inscriptions is called epigraphy. That is, when we study inscriptions, that science of studying inscriptions is known as epigraphy. And when we study the scripts in which these inscriptions are written, that is known as paleography. Inscriptions have one great advantage over literary sources, and that one great advantage is that they are reliable since they are free from interpolations. They help us to date the sculptures on which they occur. They tell us about historical geography, about the history of iconography, art, architecture, literature, languages, and even performing arts like music. Now, it is very important to note that the type of inscription is very helpful in reconstructing various aspects of history, and therefore we need to look into different types of inscriptions. Now, the inscriptions may be broadly grouped under certain heads. We will talk about each of these inscriptions separately. So, the first group or the first classification of inscriptions, that is known as, the first category is known as commercial inscriptions. Now, what do we mean by commercial inscriptions? Basically, this type of an inscription is a record of a trade transaction or other trade related activity, and from a commercial inscription we may gather information about what was being traded and the different countries or the different rulers involved in the trade, etc. For example, the Indus Valley inscriptions or the Harappan inscriptions, they seem to be of commercial type, and they also indicate the kind of trade that the Indus Valley people carried on with other civilizations. Similarly, we have the Mandsaur stone inscription of the time of Kumaragupta, which points out the use of seals for commercial purposes. So we come to know about the various methods of transaction and the various objects in which these commercial or trade transactions were done. Now, the second category of inscriptions is called the magical inscription, which basically these types of inscriptions consist of symbols which are intended to have magical properties. For example, when we talk of the Indus Valley seals, the animals which are represented on Harappan seals, they seem to indicate that the people used seals as amulets and contained magical formula on them. Amulets are generally believed to be consisting of magical formulae for healing people, etc. The next category of inscriptions is known as religious and didactic inscriptions. Religious inscriptions provide information about the history, beliefs, and practices of a religion. For example, the inscriptions of Ashoka are religious in nature, as his edicts throw a lot of light on the religion of the time. What do we mean by didactic inscriptions? They convey moral guidance or instruction. For example, Ashoka's edicts or Ashoka's inscriptions talk about the various moral principles that were enshrined in his Dhamma. When we come to do Ashoka, we will study Dhamma in detail and how it is an important source for constructing the history of Ashoka's time. The next category of inscriptions is known as the administrative inscriptions, which talk about a ruler's political and administrative record or information. For example, some inscriptions of Ashoka provide information regarding his administrative practices. Or another example could be the Junagadh inscription of Rudradaman I, which contains several administrative details. The next important category of instructions is known as the eulogistic inscriptions. Now, it comes from the word eulogia, which means praise. So, a eulogistic inscription is basically a tribute to a person, and these inscriptions are known as prashastis. For example, we have the Allahabad inscription of Samudragupta, in which Samudragupta has been praised for his achievements. Similarly, we have the Nasik cave inscription of Usavadatta, Bhitari stone inscription of Skandagupta, Aihole stone inscription of Pulakesin II, all these exalting and praising the ruler about whom the inscription has been written or has been constructed. The prashastis are of great political significance as they usually contain the name of the ruler, his early career, his administrative, military, and political achievements, his patronage, etc. But at the same time, we also need to know that they are likely to be very subjective, because sometimes they may overemphasize the achievements of the concerned ruler. Now, the next category of inscriptions is known as dedicative inscriptions, which is dedicated to someone or something, and they deal with the installation of images. For example, we have the Piprava Vas inscription. Then there are donative inscriptions, which talk about donations made to a religious or a secular entity. For example, we have the inscriptions which refer to the donations of lands and villages to educational institutions, to monasteries, to brahmanas, etc. Then we have commemorative inscriptions, inscriptions that honor or commemorate a particular event or place or person. For example, we have a large number of commemorative inscriptions which are assigned to the Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, Yadavas, etc., in remembrance of a particular ruler or a particular important event. And finally, we have literary inscriptions which have their literary value, which normally contain some poetic compositions and dramatic works, etc. So these are apart from these, there are other miscellaneous kinds of inscriptions. So inscriptions throw a very important uh, light on the ancient Indian history, or our history of the ancient past, and they are very useful archaeological sources. Now we come to the second category of archaeological sources, which is coins, and the study of coins is known as numismatics. Just as the study of inscriptions is called epigraphy, the study of coins is known as numismatics. Now we will look chronologically into how coins came into use, how coins came into practice, and then we will look into the importance of coins, or how the coins are important in constructing ancient India's history. Now, first of all, the numismatic evidence is of great importance in determining the chronology, prosperity, territorial extent, religion, and relations with neighboring countries of the reigning king and dynasty. If we start with the Stone Age, the people of Stone Age, they had neither currency nor coinage, and they mainly conducted their exchange through barter. Harappan culture also was based much on barter. And probably in the Vedic period, we find for the first time that coins were being circulated as a medium of exchange, and they were known by a number of different names. Now, the first or the earliest definite literary and archaeological evidence of coinage comes from 6th to 5th centuries BCE in the context of the Janpads, urban centers, and trade. And we have evidence of the punch-marked coins. Earliest coins were the punch-marked coins made mostly of silver and copper. And the early silver punch-marked coins have been found in quite large numbers and were issued by the Janpads and Mahajanpads. Then we have a new phase in the history of Indian coinage, which begins with the Indo-Greek kings, and then we have the Kushanas, who were the first to mint large quantities of gold coins. For example, Kujolkat Vices issued coins in copper. Then Kanishka also issued coins in gold and copper, and they have many things written and engraved upon the obverse and the reverse sides of the coins. For the Gupta period, also coins form an additional source of information. They issued large variety of gold coins, and of course, the obverse and reverse of the Gupta coins also show so many things. For example, there are some instances of coins of Samudragupta which show him playing the veena, and then we have religious symbols on the obverse of the coins which indicate the king's religious affiliations, etc. So the Guptas also struck numerous coins of improved standards. And then the Hun invaders who invaded the Guptas at the time of Skandgupta, they are also said to have imitated the coinage of the Guptas, and this indicates that trade and commerce flourished, especially in post-Maurya and Gupta times. But in the post-Gupta period, we do not have many coins, the evidence of many coins, and this indicates that probably trade and commerce was in a state of decline during this period. Now we come to the importance of coins. That is, how do coins help us in constructing history? So, as we have already seen, they give us the names of kings who ruled at various times. Then we can corroborate the information we get from the coins with other sources. We can fix the chronology of accession and other important events related with a ruler and a dynasty. Then we can make an assessment of the extent of the territory of a ruler. We can talk about trade relations. We can assess the prosperity of the people of that particular time. Then they also the coins also tell us about the religion of the ruler, depending upon the figures of the deities, etc., which are written or which are engraved on the coins. Then we come to know about the artistic taste of the people, and finally we also come to know about the science of metallurgy on the basis of the overall design of coins. So this was about coins. The third important archaeological source is monuments, paintings, and sculpture. Now, monuments, they basically consist of buildings, caves, stupas, temples, etc. For example, I will mention certain examples before you so that the point becomes clear. For example, we have the ancient sites at Takshila, Sarnath, Rajgir. Then we have the caves of Khandagiri, Udaygiri in Orissa, Ajanta, Ellora, Elephanta in Maharashtra. Then we have the remains of Hampi, Bijapur, and Golconda in the south. Uh, Similarly, we have a number of temples of Mahabalipuram, Kanchipuram, temples of Devgarh and Jhansi, Bhitargaon in near Kanpur. So monuments also help us in constructing history in a very prominent way. Then we come to paintings. Now, the love of Indians for art is showcased in paintings. For example, the important rock cut paintings we have at Bhimbetka, or for that matter in Banda in Uttar Pradesh, and we certainly have the best examples of paintings from Ajanta and Ellora. Sculptures are also important for constructing history. Sculptural art is known as Shilpakala. For example, we have bronze sculptures of Harappan culture, particularly the bronze dancing girl, which has been found from uh, Mohenjo-daro. And then we have numerous terracotta evidences, terracotta figurines found at ancient sites of Patliputra, Mathura, etc. So this is about sculptures. Now the fourth important archaeological source is material remains, in which we talk about excavations done at several places, and the materials that are unearthed, they tell us about their craft, trade, amusements, etc. For example, we have the excavations of the Indus Valley or Harappan sites. Then we have the excavations at Takshila, Nalanda, and all these places. Another important archaeological source which comes under material remains is pottery types. And pottery types like bowls, lids, plates, jars, etc. have been found at the excavations. Apart from excavations and pottery, we have other pieces of antiquity as well, which are like tools, seals, weapons, toys, clay articles, etc. So this is all about archaeological sources. I have narrated to you the different categories or the different classifications of archaeological sources, and how and in what manner they help us to construct our ancient past. Now the second part of this video will focus upon an analysis of literary and archaeological sources, for which purpose I have chosen to quote certain portions of R.S. Sharma's book Ancient India's Past. In the subsequent slides, you will find certain excerpts from R.S. Sharma's book Ancient Indian Past, uh, on the basis of which we will talk about how history can be constructed on the basis of literary and archaeological sources, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of using these sources. So, uh, we have so far looked into both the literary and archaeological sources of ancient Indian history. Now we shall look into the ideas and opinions that have been put forward about the efficacy and the historical importance of these sources. Okay, now the first point that R.S. Sharma makes is that literary sources or texts have since long been the principal sources for constructing ancient Indian history. But in order to bring more accuracy or objectivity in the dates and contents of various historical events, as has been done in the texts, it is extremely important to examine the texts in the context of archaeological evidences. Now, this corroboration, second point he makes is that this corroboration needs to be done by correlating the literary and archaeological evidences. For example, we have to correlate the later Vedic age with painted graveware, or for that matter, the early Pali texts have to be related to NBPW archaeology, and only then historical construction can be reliable. But sometimes the difference in the interpretation between literary and archaeological sources can create some historical discrepancy. For example, the Puranas would date Ram of Ayodhya to around 2000 BC, but diggings in Ayodhya do not corroborate any settlement around that date. Same historical discrepancy can be seen when the inscriptions from Mathura between 200 BC and 300 AD do not attest to the presence of Krishna during this period, which is in contrast to what the Mahabharata says. So these are the various um, points that R.S. Sharma has shared in his book. And finally, he says that if we are to construct dates, events, and chronology, then archaeological sources are much more reliable than literary ones. Inscriptions, coins, and other archaeological evidences throw authentic light on the political, social, economic, and religious life of ancient India. But at the same time, literary sources cannot be underrated, and for a holistic historical reconstruction, it is important for the historian to take into account the material contained in the texts as well as in inscriptions, coins, and archaeology. So, this is a basic summing up of uh, how important literary and archaeological sources can be for constructing ancient Indian history. We have talked about the merits and demerits of these two sources, and we come to the conclusion that we have to work in collaboration, or we have to work, we have to collectively use literary and archaeological sources for a more holistic historical reconstruction. So, thank you for watching my video, and if you liked the video, please share it with others. Thank you for watching.